It's time for a little in-depth look at U of L's depth charts and what you can expect to see during week 1 of the 2012 season. Tonight, Raashaan and I will take a look at the U of L offense, starting with the quarterbacks. And Raashaan, Teddy Bridgewater, first of all, everybody expects him to really take that quantum leap up and turn into an elite quarterback. And he's got a really, U of L probably has one of the more dependable backups in the country in Will Stein. They're set at this spot, aren't they?
Oh, you would definitely think so. I mean, a lot of people have said, if Teddy Bridgewater goes down, what's going to happen? But I think Will Stein is going to be a great backup there. But there's no doubt that Teddy Bridgewater is coming into his own right now. He looks like a completely different player out there. A lot's been made about the fact that he's gained about 27 pounds on that frame. He's up to, I want to say, around 220 pounds is his playing weight right now. And on that 6'3" frame, he looks like a grown man out there, and you can definitely feel it in the velocity of his throws. And the wide receivers have had nothing but praise for him right now.
Moving on to the running backs now, this is much has been made about this by committee. First of all, do you think a team could be successful without a feature back? And Dominic Brown, Jeremy Wright, Sonoris Perry, Corbin Lamb are the 4 guys that are being mentioned. Is there one of those guys you think that's capable of doing that? Will it have to be a committee? And can you be a legitimate top 15, 20 type team with a committee?
Well, you know what? And most times when you talk about running back by committee, you're talking about having maybe not a very good player that stands out. Right. But I think in this case it's a little bit different, especially with the top 3. When you talk about Dominic Brown, when you talk about Jeremy Wright, as well as Sonoris Perry, all 3 of these guys bring a lot of different aspects to the game. Dominic Brown is more of your north-south power runner. He brings that, that strength, that size, that bulk like maybe a Michael Bush would have. Then you also have Jeremy Wright, who's more of the speed guy. He likes to get outside and take it the distance. And then Sonoris Perry, as well as having the speed, he has great hands. They love to use him in the passing game and shotgun situations. So I really don't think it's a situation where they don't have enough. I think maybe they just have 3 very, very good running backs right there.
Will they have a 1,000-yard rusher this year, you think?
I don't think so. I think that you'll probably see Dominic Brown, probably the leading rusher, because I think he's going to get your short yardage carries and maybe your first or second downs, but probably 700 or 800 yards for the top back.
Wide receiver position, a lot of people feel like this is probably, even with the loss of Michael Lee Harris, a lot of people feel like this would be one of the most talented positions on the team. Let's start off at the X spot, Devontae Parker. One of the questions I was always asking myself when I watched U of L games is, number one, why isn't he in on 75 to 80% of the plays, and why aren't they going to him more? I wouldn't be shocked to see his numbers double, maybe even triple this season.
I totally agree with you, and I think that the biggest thing with Devontae Parker is that he's learned how to be a better wide receiver. Last year, he played off of his talent. He has size, he has great hands, and really they just used him to go straight down the field, get the jump balls, those type of things. He did lead them in touchdown receptions last year, but I think this year he's become a better route runner. He's understanding how to get in and out of his breaks, get that separation to get those short 5 to 10-yard routes. So he's definitely stepped up his game, and he was the only guy that we pretty much saw in every snap during the early practices that were open for Charlie Strong. So.
Andrea Smith is a battle-tested veteran. What can we expect out of Bryce McNeil? Have you been able to hear, have you heard anything, any reports out of practice? Will he be a factor in the rotation early on? I mean, he was at Clemson. I think it was a 4-star guy out of high school. What can we expect out of Bryce McNeil this year?
Bryce was of course, former U.S. Army All-American, a great talent, decided to transfer from Clemson. From what I understand, he's only been in camp for a couple of weeks now, but he's a great talent. He has great hand. He's a very good athlete. I would expect if he's going to make an impact early, it's probably going to be in the kicking game, maybe punt or kick returns. But he will get some opportunities. But you just have so much depth right now at the wide receiver spot that it's going to be a wait and see on Bryce. But I think the talent will show through at some point.
Moving on to the wide receiver H position, where you've got Scott Radcliffe, who was one of the surprises of spring camp, always known as a solid possession guy. Scott Radcliffe, Eli Rogers. Eli will probably end up being the guy, but Radcliffe can give you some things as a possession receiver, don't you think?
Yeah, Scott Radcliffe, he's very dependable. He's going to run good routes. He's not going to put the ball on the ground. He's not going to have many drops. So I definitely think that Radcliffe is going to be a very dependable player. But there, you do have Eli Rogers. Of course, he led the team in receptions last year, second on the team in receiving yards. So he's going to be probably your reliable guy. But there's one dark horse you want to pay attention to, and that's Damian Copeland. From everything that I've seen out of him, I think he's a young man that might step up and could slide into that starting spot.
Yeah, we've got him listed at number 1 at the Z receiver position, Damian Copeland, along with a couple other names. Jared Davis, been around the program, hasn't played a lot, but I think it seems like the coaches are confident that if he had to play, that he'd be productive. What about Charles Gaines? That's a guy, you know, a lot of people raved about, moved him over from defensive back, could be a big play guy, but Copeland and Gaines, you've got your known commodities in Rodgers and Devontae Parker and Andrell Smith. Copeland and Gaines are kind of the X factors. What do you expect out of those two guys, specifically Gaines?
Yeah, well, Charles Gaines, of course, he was a cornerback last year. Basically, the offensive coaches and defensive coaches have been arguing over who's going to get him because he's such an elite talent. But I think that Louisville wanted to get a little bit more playmaking. Apparently, he's brought a lot of the same swagger that Josh Bellamy provided last year for this year's group of wide receivers. So I think Charles Gaines is a guy that's definitely going to get a lot of time. He and Damian Copeland both have made huge strides this year. Charles Gaines only playing wide receiver for about the last month or so, but you can definitely see the speed, the hands, and that bravado that you like to see from those Miami, Florida kids.
Here's one of the question marks I have on offense. This was the tight end spot. I mean, they've got, you know, three guys, Nate Nord, Ryan Hubble, and Chris White. Can there be a productive tight end from a pass catching frame of mind, or do they have enough of that from the wide receivers where these guys will just be required to block and kind of be an extra lineman?
Well, Nate Nord is definitely going to be the guy in the style of maybe like a Gary Barnidge, who was very successful at the University of Louisville. I think he's going to be the guy that you look for to really take a big step up. He's had some injury issues and injury concerns, so we're hoping that he can finally have a healthy season, because I think he can bring something in the passing game, as well as Chris White. He was a former walk-on. He's done some very nice things, had some nice catches at the end of last year as well. So I expect for him to do well. Ryan Hubble, he's more of your blocker. He's going to be in there on your big formations when you get down short in the goal line type of sets, but he also has some nice hands as well.
Okay, let's move on to the offensive line. You know, going into last season, huge question mark. It was a huge issue early in the year. The line progressively got better, struggled a little bit with that pass rush, NC State pass rush in the Belk Bowl, but they've got, you know, most of their guys back. Should be a year better. Can this be a strength, or is this still kind of a work in progress?
Well, I tell you what, you have 4 guys on this offensive line right now that have NFL aspirations and will get some looks from the NFL. Of course, Mario Benavidez, you know, is your main cog. He's your senior. I think he's one of the reasons that they struggled so much early, is because Mario didn't play early in the season dealing with some injury issues. But the fact that he's back, then you have the 3 super sophomores. You have Jake Smith, you have Jamon Brown, as well as John Miller. Those guys are going to bring a ton of talent. I think the fact that they've been able to play together and practice together the whole offseason as well as fall camp, they're going to be a lot better. And then, of course, you have Alex Cupper at the right tackle spot. He's going to shore it up. He's a senior. He's been through the grind. So I definitely think you're going to see a much better offensive line a lot earlier on.
And when you look at the offense and you compare it to Kentucky's personnel, the one concern area that I'm hearing from Kentucky fans in general is just their cornerback, their defensive backfield matching up with the Louisville receivers. This is an area that you feel like the Cards can really, really exploit.
Yeah, I think that the matchup between the University of Louisville wide receivers and the Kentucky DBs is a complete mismatch. Unfortunately, because of attrition due to injuries, due to academic ineligibilities. Yeah, I think that right now, if you're a Louisville wide receiver, you're licking your chops. I mean, because I seriously believe that Louisville is about 8 or 9 deep at the wide receiver spot, and with Devontae Parker, with Eli Rogers, with Charles Gaines, and a cast of thousands at this point, I don't think Kentucky can cover them, and I think it's going to be a very long day for Kentucky.
Louisville struggled running the ball at times last year. One thing, I mean, they're obviously with Bridgewater and those receivers, they're going to be able to throw it around. Will the running game be good enough against against the North Carolina defensive front? They're going to have to be able to. There's some teams on the schedule, Rutgers, that where Bridgewater isn't going to be able to just drop back 40 times and throw. They're going to have to run the ball.
Right.
Is the running game improved enough to where they'll be able to balance things out?
Well, you know, as far as offense is concerned, you're only as good as your offensive line, and I think that the simple fact that the offensive line has spent the whole offseason together, the fact that those guys have gelled, is definitely going to help, but I also think that the running backs are going to step up as well. Jeremy Wright was oft injured last year. The fact that he's back and healthy, you have Dominique Brown that has a full year underneath him as far as a running back, learning the nuances, of course, coming over from the quarterback spot. I think that's going to help, but Charlie Strong has always been about running the ball first and foremost. They're going to have to do that, and I think they'll be much more successful.
Sean Watson's in his first year full-time, I mean, going into the year as the guy at offensive coordinator. Do you expect, I mean, I've heard rumblings that they might tweak things a little bit. Do you expect to see a lot of difference, or will it pretty much look, in theory, the same kind of offense, just maybe the players are a year older and better?
Well, I think that you're going to see a lot more of this West Coast style this year. Of course, Sean Watson took over about mid-season, so there were a lot of nuances that are going to be more seen this year, but I think you're going to see that West Coast style, the short passing game, trying to get guys out in space. You'll see him put his marks on it, but I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of the same. I think that because you have so many wide receivers that have so much talent, you might see a lot more for wide receiver, maybe a lot more shotgun, but you'll see a little bit of last year, but it's going to be a lot new as well.
We were talking a little earlier. You don't think that the spread is 14. You don't think this is going to be much of a contest, do you?
At this point, you know what? I've continued to break it down, and I just don't see where the University of Kentucky has an advantage. In my estimation, breaking down both rosters, I say UK maybe has one guy that could start for the University of Louisville right now. I know it's a rivalry game, but Kentucky's dealing with so many things on the injury front in the secondary that unfortunately I think it's going to be a bad day for UK.
All right, thanks for coming in, Raashaan. We'll tackle U of L's defense on tomorrow night's show.